You should be live. Hello everyone, welcome! I am Pseudo. This is going to be a live watching reaction, whatever you want to call it, of their balance preview for the November 29th, I think, patch that's coming up. Hopefully with an eyebrowless Cal, Kohan, and Roy. They had some crazy shaving shenanigans going on during Extra Life, but let's get into it. I'm excited for this, partially because they're going to be nerfing some stuff, and partially because hopefully they'll be buffing some other stuff. So nerfs don't excite me as much. But yeah, you can check me out on Twitch, YouTube, lots of balanced streams, previews, gem stores, and whatnot. Getting Twitter going too, so if you want, hit that up. Links are all in the description. But let's go look at the little preview they teased a little bit ago while we wait for this stream to start. I will do my best not to talk over the stream as much. I know that was an issue last time, but it should be good and audio levels should be balanced this time. Go check this wonderful little preview thing out. If you didn't know, they teased this. They've been doing this. Kind of really cool. I'm a big fan. This is honestly what I was talking about when I was like, they need to communicate better, and I love this stuff. So if you haven't seen it before, this is what they teased. They did something similar with Druid, where they sort of carefully cropped that Druid's pet health was going to return to normal. I think we can safely ignore the signets here, unless they're, I don't know, buffing Guardian signets again, even though they just did that. I think what we want to focus on are these diamonds here that are lit up that people hinted on Reddit were indeed kind of a thing. So you see we are out of combat here. We don't have the we're out of combat. Yeah, because we have the ability to change utility skills. So we don't think we're disabling weapon swap. Some people speculated Firebrands would lose a whole weapon slot. Don't worry, it's not warrior. Don't have to worry about that. I think we're pretty safe. But what we have here is some nice little lit up diamonds, even though they were not in a book. And I'm pretty sure Reddit hit right on the nose that Guardian books are now not going to be choose a book, as I originally hoped and thought it might one day be, but it's going to be sort of like Thief Initiative, where you go into a book and then have charges per page. So I'm pretty excited about that, because I've thought for a really long time that Guardian, well, Firebrand in general, has been very, quite powerful, and it's, if nothing else, I'd like to see other things brought up to compete with it if they're not going to bring this down. I mean, look at this nonsense right now. You don't see these diamonds lit up in the builder. I don't know if it does in the game. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but maybe we'll see that. Maybe we'll see some charges restored to, like, the Elite Mantra as well. It kind of got nerfed pretty hard in World vs. World, where it's down to 2, which actually makes it almost worse than the Mesmer one, which is just stun break and give buttloads of stability. Where is it? One that no one uses, but they should. This thing is silly. What's the cooldown on the Firebrand one too, even though I think Firebrands have a trait for it. But yeah, I'm Pseudo. This is going to be a balanced stream, sort of discussion along with the class, as we're watching, reacting, whatever you want to call it, to this stream. I'm very excited. This is a build channel. I've got a Broken Tempest build coming out soon. Subscribe to the channel for that. Lots of weapon previews this weekend for the recent Lion's Arch balance patch, if you haven't caught a lot of those already. I think the last one, the next one's going up tomorrow. So subscribe, or just hit us up on YouTube for that. They're going to start streaming on YouTube. I'd rather watch it on YouTube. It's usually better quality, but we might have to do it with Twitch. Oh gosh, sorry about that. Okay. So, what else could they do? Let's guess here. If Firebrand's getting the whack stick, what else is pretty egregious in World vs. World? They've kind of brought Scourge down, but I think in a really unhealthy way, where they just limit the targets really hard with the shades. A lot of people want Alacrity on Scourge. I don't know if that would fly because it already just dumps out barrier and rezzing power. It's really good for like brute forcing, not very difficult content. If they put the target cap back up, they could reduce some of the, like, just, I don't know, ubiquitous burning and corruption, so you should like have to spec into either corruption or burning or torment. Burning/torment rather, like one of the two. I think that would go a long way to helping restore sort of Scourge balance. Oh, any other information? Nope. All right. What else can we do while we're waiting? We can do this. Let's go to YouTube. my level channel here. Got that. Check that this is going all right. Level channel here. Sounds good. Looks good. Forgot to test before the last one. I had a whole thing that I did all the strikes and didn't even talk over any of it. So that may or may not be up on the channel. I'm gonna watch this. This is like a minute long. These are some of the mounts they put in the game recently. Or rather, I think these come out next week or the week after. They usually don't do it in the middle week for mount licenses. This is poop quality, YouTube. Thank you so much for not giving me 4K video without me paying anymore. Appreciate that. Burb. Best deviation of mounts I think they put in the game, these burbs. And I'd be tempted to get this, but jackals just already have all the best skins, so I don't know. Might get that one. The oceanic mounts, if you haven't seen, kind of have a glow to them as well. It's pretty cool. It'll work a lot I like as well. But yeah, if you haven't seen this or if you want it at a slower pace, I do previews for all the data mine gem store stuff. Shout out to that shaman. Don't monetize any of it, just want to do my part to help the community. It's really interesting they're doing like variants like Arene and Starblessed of the new style of mounts. But also really interesting we haven't gotten any turtle skins. They'd be pushing the turtle. Still wouldn't even have a turtle. Oh well, that's that. How many minutes we got? Oops. 6 seconds. Here we go. I'm excited. Oh, I'm so excited. Watch them have another countdown after this countdown.
Hello, and welcome to the November 29th Balance Preview Stream. I am Roy Marks, and I'm joined today by Cal CMC Cohen.
Yes, and of course that is Roy Marks, professional bingo player. And we're obviously here to talk about the November Balance update. We are doing this from home this week, so
Interesting.
that's pretty exciting, actually. Roy's running the show.
Take my little card.
We've obviously called in from our homes, and Roy's eyebrows are real
from question mark.
Nothing unusual. Well, let's enough jokes.
They almost don't even look shaved, to be honest.
We should probably
should have
just
taken a Sharpie and like colored it in, you know.
Obviously, some things to talk about first. Let's see. We'll be posting the notes on the forums immediately following this, so you'll see the full notes. There will be a couple things in this presentation that aren't going to be in the notes because we are still kind of in that iteration phase. Obviously, we have the preview going out, and there's going to be some time for feedback to get a few more changes in, but there will be a few disconnects between the slides we show today and the preview post that goes up on the forums.
That's okay, I forgive them.
I mean, that happened last time. Nothing too unusual.
Let me know if the audio's good. Let me know if the sound's good.
Probably
know if you're as excited as I am.
Let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to say at the start? I guess we can talk about some high-level ideas for this balance update. You know, obviously we teased something earlier this week, and players figured it out pretty quickly. I would say this one wasn't supposed to be too much of a challenge. Honestly, the last one wasn't too much of a challenge either, but this one was a bit exciting in terms of the actual content. And so there is obviously some changes to Firebrand that we'll dive into pretty shortly, but also beyond that, we're looking at bringing up a lot of underperforming DPS builds, especially on the PvE side. So as we kind of go through all the different sections, that will be a pretty common theme amongst a lot of changes.
Stream's going to be longer.
Yeah, and I think we could probably just jump over to the preview.
Yeah, let's kick it off with the teaser image.
Yeah, we can show everyone
where we started
about.
last week. So here's the teaser image. Yeah. Let's see what stands out here. A
lot of signets.
No, I'm kidding.
There's a lot of signets.
Yeah,
that's
there you go.
Because obviously 5 signets is the best build for any profession that's able to equip that.
Unless you're not mechanist, yes.
Oh, that's not correct. That's not correct. Unlucky. Anyway, 5 seconds is great.
Now it's a diamond striker.
Obviously, there's a locked weapon swap. That's still not something that we're going to do to any elite specialization or profession, as much as it may show.
Fuck you, Blitchworn has it.
But we'll probably still keep including it in the previews as long as people still keep getting tricked by it. So there's that.
Dude.
And obviously, the key component of this is that
yes, absolutely. Thank you.
A couple of pages for a Firebrand who is not currently in a tome. So what does that mean, Roy?
Yeah, so obviously normally on Firebrand, or currently in live, when you enter a tome, one of your 3 tomes, you will have all 5 or 8, potentially, of your pages filled up. And then when you're not in a tome, you shouldn't have any pages normally showing up. But as Cal mentioned, pretty quickly after we posted this teaser, people kind of caught on to what was going on here. And you now, in fact, will have pages when you're not in a tome, which, of course, leads us to kind of, I'd say, the big sort of meat of the Firebrand update here, if we want to just move on.
Yeah, so we can talk about kind of what this entails, and a lot of people kind of identified this as, well, is this like an initiative style system? And the answer is, well, kind of. It's more of a
1 page,
hybrid.
8 seconds.
It's a lot similar to Revenant, where skills are going to have both an initiative cost or a page cost in this case, and
activate instantly. Interesting.
A cooldown, and this is just really giving us the most flexibility.
Removes the
in
passive
how we balance
effect.
This, and where's
that's kind of huge.
Adjust page costs, adjust skill cooldowns, adjust
once every
pretty much any of these things.
Okay.
And as part of this is we wanted the tomes to have no cooldown.
I dig it.
And this is really going to give the most flexibility, because I guess we should start with talking about the goals here. And really the goal of switching to this style of system is that there's going to be an opportunity cost to every decision that Firebrand makes. Because if you look at Firebrand right now, you're able to, if you're a DPS build, you hop into Justice, you press all your buttons, and you deal all your damage. And then you still always have the opportunity to hop into Courage or hop into Resolve when those tomes are available and get access to the super strong utility value from those kits. And so that kind of plays into something we talked about in the philosophy a couple weeks ago now, where Firebrand is a profession that is able to do too many things at once. And there's really no decision point, there's no trade-off, there's no opportunity cost to the things that Firebrand is able to do. And so by switching over to this shared resource system, it is now every time I use a skill in Justice, that is taking away my resource that I could use to spend on a skill in Resolve or Courage. And it's really going to not necessarily force Firebrands to pick, like, I only can deal DPS, because you can still kind of spread your pages across all 3 tomes with no cooldown. You're free to hop in pretty much anytime you want.
I think that
but you are going to be
interval
making
is probably going to be reduced by the Virtues trade, cooldown trade as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple sort of pretty important things as well to touch upon for this. The first one is that right now, one of the first thing we look at when we're thinking about balancing Firebrand, whether it's a buff or a nerf, is the cooldowns of the tomes themselves. And so by making them instant and, having them share pages,
the water gets blurred.
It opens up a few more doors for us when it comes to looking at the Firebrand class. Now we can change the rate at which pages refresh. And you can see up on screen, right now it's going to be 1 page every 8 seconds. That's what we're going with initially. That might change in the future. We can change the cooldowns of tome skills themselves, where before, maybe that was a little bit relevant if you were staying in a tome for any sort of period of time, but now it really can be felt a lot more. Because if we increase a cooldown that was normally 10 seconds to 30 seconds, you're only using that skill every 30 seconds or so. And we can also potentially change the number of pages that a skill costs, which is a really great kind of mechanic. And really
they could make them cost
so
more pages.
It opens up a lot more
like
doors
Revenant,
for us to be able to balance the spec, where before it definitely was a little bit kind of shoehorned into the tome skills, the tome cooldowns themselves.
I didn't think of that.
And then the other thing I think that's pretty important to mention is, my apologies, is that, we're going to be keeping an eye on, because this is obviously a pretty extensive rework. This is obviously something that's going to be very, it's going to change up Firebrand a lot. And so, it might be really powerful on release, might not be as powerful on release. And so it's something we're going to be keeping an eye on and making sure, again, we have all these numbers now we can tweak. If we need to, we'll make sure to do so, following this update.
Right. I would definitely expect, some amount of follow-up changes between November update and the next balance update, just in between, making sure that once we see like the real world gameplay applications of this rework, then there's probably going to be a bit of tuning that's necessary.
Yeah, but I guess we can.
Other things that have been on the screen for a while that we haven't specifically said. So before we start showing this off in game, let's talk about
Oh, I'm great.
what are we doing with
Span trip was
passives
great.
and
Thank you for
active
asking.
traits. Because, you know, when
How's
tomes have
BDO?
no cooldown, you
I
might
saw you
expect that
jump
you
into
always
the
have the
stream
passive,
last night, but I
that's
was
one of the strongest Grandmaster traits in the entire Elite
unable
spec,
to
so
talk.
that is not something you want to
Feeling
really
very
get
sick.
for free.
Feeling better now.
And more on that later, actually, once we talk about some trait reworks. But entering a tome is going to put your passive on cooldown for a certain duration, and this is something that we're going to, you know, we can't give that for free. Similarly, with active traits, we can't let you trigger Indomitable Courage every 2 seconds or every 1 second, because that is just crazy. So it's going to be essentially cooldown gated for both of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you want to hop into game now, or?
Yeah, we can hop into the game and show
Oh,
some
they
stuff
actually
off.
gonna neat.
And I think Roy is going to be doing that. And so keep in mind that there's going to be a couple things here that are maybe not quite,
sure okay.
You know, there we have some temp icons still in here, but those are going to be ready to go for release. No problem.
Absolutely. So yeah, we can see that activating F3, it's instant, and we have the little timer here.
Oh. Yeah,
Shows up, nice red on the buff bar. It shows me how long that courage. So that's the passive, and that would also be the cooldown for if I was running Indomitable Courage. But then I leave the tome, and it's still off cooldown.
Yeah, I need to make sure it wasn't COVID. I'm gonna do an at-home test. My girlfriend
use
comes over this weekend, but
5
should be good.
Costs
She's been having
3
people
pages.
just come into work
back
with
into
COVID. Because, oh, geez, that costs so many pages.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. So
we
we have made kind of a first pass on some of the obviously Courage
First
5
pass.
costing 3 pages. That's
Ow! Oh!
Currently we balanced the page cost either 1, 2, or 3.
3 pages.
Necessarily how it has to be forever, but this is just kind of the number that we decided on for the more potent, the most powerful skills.
Goodbye, Firebrand. Holy cats! Like it's still gonna be good. It's still gonna be the world versus world thing. But man,
page cooldown
3 pages.
So you always press the same skill over and over necessarily.
Ouch!
But beyond that, we've made a couple of updates to some traits as well. So you want to hop in to show off some traits. The big thing is the Grandmaster traits. So
yeah,
currently,
let's see them.
You know, Lore Master is kind of the best in slot. Everyone only plays Lore Master because, well, it's just the best trait. And part of that is because maintaining passives is just so powerful. And so for this update, we've split out each of the
they sort of did what I wanted.
Their own trait. So one
trait
is going to
this is kind of what I wanted.
Where
they were just going to have to choose a book.
Trying to kind of give more room for Firebrand builds.
I swear to God, they watch my streams or something.
Be more of that supporty heal role. You're going to take.
Like I'm not taking any credit for this because Words Are Easy and Works Hard, but like this is almost exactly what I wanted.
For like battle presence.
For Firebrand.
For just self-sustain in general. And it's
I thought the Grandmaster was going to make you like each trait like
generation.
I don't know if you can see my cursor like
kind of
minor, adept, and then
enabling
Grandmaster or whatever they're called, like the 3 that you can choose.
Flexible in how many.
I wanted each of those to be like you could choose a book or you could choose better traits.
More restricting DPS builds to be more focused on DPS.
Cool.
You'll have
this is very cool.
Lower page generation, so you can't always dip into Courage, always dip into Resolve, get access to those powers.
I mean, I'd be down. I've applied like twice to arenanet when they've had openings, but I don't think they hire you if you don't already live in Seattle. I found that out like after the second time my friend in Seattle told me. I was like, darn it!
So that's potentially a really strong option, and we're going to see how this kind of plays out among like all of the justice changes and all the other Firebrand changes, and we're going to see kind of where.
This is so cool. This is like the best thing they could have done for Firebrand, in my opinion. Like I'm sure Firebrand players right now who are used to the ubiquitous power are going to hate this, but this is
general boony
probably very similar to how I would have done it.
It's pretty similar to the old Stoic Demeanor, but instead of applying conditions, it's going to be applying boons to your allies. So if you're less focused on healing, maybe you're more of just like a boon Firebrand support build, then maybe you'll take Stoic Demeanor.
That's not even close to how good old Stoic Demeanor was.
Do you want to talk about Swift Scholar?
Yeah, so one last change we have here with the Swift
Scholar. Where are my End of Dragons runes?
This is going to reward you for kind of focusing on a single tome, and this isn't something we feel is mandatory or we want to be mandatory. We're obviously giving a lot of flexibility here with being able to go to any tome at any time. But if you find yourself in a position to chain together a few skills in a row in the same tome, then Swift Scholar is now also going to refund you a page.
Okay.
Which is it's kind of rewarding you for
this is so cool.
Large store of pages
is so cool.
And then
what do you think, Degru?
Skills consecutively. where you still obviously have the
And
opportunity
welcome if you're just
to
joining Emster
jump into
does sort
each
of a watch and
tome
react stream.
as you
I'm
need
very
it, as
excited
you
about
want to
this.
skill.
Build
But if
crafter
you find the
myself.
opportunity to really save
these
up
streams.
and pull up those pages, then you'll get a little bit more value out of Swift Scholar here.
Yeah. Also important to note that you are no longer going to be getting quickness leaving tomes from the straight, only entering tomes.
Thank God.
Yeah, it'll just be on enter.
Yeah. A little bit of an update there.
Small update.
Indeed. I guess we can take a look at back to the notes, and we can go over the tables here.
Yeah, so we
Some
made some
lovely
tables.
we've got.
Get your print screens ready. I mean, this will also be in the patch notes. So,
Yeah.
but here's the kind of updated page costs and cooldowns. There's a few differences between game modes that you will see. And obviously, these are the things that are really going to require the most tuning. Really, is finding the right number between the page recharge and the page costs and the cooldowns, so that this feels pretty good. But
especially
this is kind of where we're starting it out.
Especially
I'm
per
really.
game mode, right?
I want to know
Because
how much the
obviously,
bubble
you know, in
costs.
PvE,
It's got to be
a
at
lot
least
of
2,
the
right?
skills that are probably a bit more of a focus for PvE are going to be the justice skills, whereas in more of the competitive modes, you're probably going to be focusing a little bit more on resolve, a little bit more on courage. Obviously, the pull going to be very good in competitive as well from justice, but we're still going to be probably, as you can see, splitting page costs and cooldowns between modes.
How much
as well.
is the bubble and the taunt?
Yeah,
I
so
care about
there
the
will be a
taunt, but
few
no one else
updates to
does.
some of the tome skills. It might look a little weird for competitive players to say, "Hey, why is Eternal Oasis 3-page cost when it currently converts 2 conditioned spoons?" But that'll be a bit more powerful once we ship this update.
I was kind of I missed it. I think it's at 3.
And
I want to go back. I don't think I can go back.
So
darn it,
obviously,
Twitch.
again, a couple
much
of these
was the
skills
bubble?
going to be a little bit more impactful in some modes. So we do have some game mode specific changes here. But game wide, Searing Spell is going to inflict vulnerability. That's the one on Justice, and then we've got some just
2 to
PvE
5.
ones,
Yeah.
some
Okay.
competitive mode specific changes as well.
Yeah, a lot of these changes on the competitive side are things that we've previously brought down. As Firebrand has really
protection
been a
instead of stability. God damn.
Overperformer, I would say, for a lot of its lifetime in competitive modes.
Excuse
and
me.
PvP, obviously, it's
That's
been
ridiculous.
so many times that it's kind of just completely irrelevant, which is not something we really want to see. And so this is a great opportunity for us to bring a few of these tools back up as we're moving to this shared page system. And it's something we'll obviously be keeping a close eye on. Definitely love to see Firebrand relevant again in PvP and feel maybe a bit more balanced in both PvE and Worldly World.
Great.
Absolutely.
And one of the big notes here on the bottom is unflinching charge. This is the courage auto attack. We felt it's just a little bit too powerful if that was able to give stability, given that there's no cooldown on courage, even with an 8-second page cooldown or a 6-second page cooldown, depending on your build. Being able to get stability that frequently on demand, just a little bit too powerful, so it's going to be just a protection source now.
Yeah, and you'll still obviously have a lot of stability access now that Unbroken Lines isn't gated behind that 75-second courage cooldown. It has its own cooldown, obviously, but you'll still have a lot of access to stability on Firebrand. And then here's just the trait changes that we already kind of went over. Another thing to note, obviously, currently Renewed Focus recharges the cooldowns of your tomes. That's not going to be helpful when they don't have cooldowns. So instead, it will recharge your trait cooldowns and also give you some pages.
Yeah, so similar note here, there's a handful of traits that all interact with virtue cooldowns, and those are obviously very relevant when tomes have cooldowns, but now they'll just be reducing the cooldown of these passive or these active trait trigger buffs that we showed off a little bit. So if you have virtues, those will,
Needs more water. Somebody hydrate Kel.
Obviously have just a lower cooldown, and if you have something like Tenacious Defense, that'll tick down your courage timer, and so on and so forth. And Renewed Focus is going to give you some pages back and just refresh all of those immediately.
Fixed Staring Dragon. What was that guy in the back?
Yeah, and I believe that might be it for I say it for Firebrand, obviously.
Yeah, that's it.
Pretty...
some minor changes to the Firebrand Elite specialization.
Yeah.
That's all.
But beyond that, we have some more Guardian changes, and kicking it off is going to be some stuff with Dragon Hunter.
Yeah,
mostly on the PvE side, but yeah, want to talk about this, Roy?
Yeah, so just similar, kind of pretty much, leading in here with Dragon Hunter, like Cal mentioned, we're trying to bring up several underperforming DPS builds with a primary kind of focus on PvE. Dragon Hunter used to be, almost a mainstay of a lot of, instant content groups in terms of a DPS build. Hasn't really seen a lot of, value as of recent, and so, just some coefficient bumps.
Hunter's Ward is very good,
Dragon Hunter.
I will say. That's kind of
In PV.
taking away the
nothing-
thing, the
nothing
only
too
thing it
crazy.
has. No,
Like,
the
there
Hunter's
is,
Sword
see
a
thing's
lot of,
really good. It's the longbow
damage
5
increases
that
here, a lot of cooldown reductions.
drops those like
True
pens
Shot
that people have to
is
stay in.
getting a bit of a cooldown bump and a little bit of a damage boost, and this obviously is a bit of a damage loss overall for that skill specifically, but we are trying to just make it a bit less clunky to have that like stationary cast every 4 seconds. Now it's going to be every 6 seconds. We considered it bumping up to even 8, and then kind of compensating across the rest of the kit as well. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on that one and seeing how it plays, but obviously we want to bring DH damage up a little bit.
Yeah.
And did you already talk about the cage?
I was just gonna mention
Honestly,
it.
I just wasn't listening while you were talking.
Like,
So.
the
That's fair.
skill,
I mean,
man.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm mostly the same. Just kidding. I hang on every word. But yeah, obviously everything else here is PV. On the very bottom, we got Hunter's Ward in World versus World, just reducing that cage duration a little bit, so you're not getting punished quite as hard when you get caught in that CC. Still, 3 seconds, still going to definitely be impactful. Still going to be able to follow up on that very easily in World versus World, but maybe be a little bit less punishing for players.
I would
trying to get out of that cage.
cool down a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, and then
For sure.
moving on,
Do
I believe we
that.
have some.
Moving on, we have a handful of buffs
Willbender
to
and
the
Corbett.
Willbender as well, and some other stuff that's a bit more general. We see some sword buffs. We see
Cool.
some Sword of
Bow.
Justice buff. We see
Percent increase.
Binding
overall, I
Blade get a little
think.
bit more damage. Obviously, the big Willbender changes here are just a few extra percentage points on the damage multipliers, and a pretty significant buff to Heaven's Palm as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, like we're making a lot of changes to bring up underperforming builds. These are obviously going to be things that we want to see the impact on, gauge the impact on, and we'll
Very
continue to make
interesting.
follow-up changes
Mostly
to
PvE
any
stuff
of
so
these
far.
builds that are still underperforming.
Okay. I believe that is it for Guardian.
That's all we got on the Guardian side.
Yeah.
So we can hop into.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately,
Warriors.
there's 8 other classes.
Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest of them will probably be a bit quicker, hopefully.
Bloody
We've got
road
some
bug
cool
fix!
stuff to do,
Rejoice!
so-
Yeah.
Shout out in the
And
chat.
Unlike last stream, we're also actually going in a specific order too. We're
That's
going
amazing.
by class armor weight this time, instead of just jumping all over the board. So, nice order for the stream this time.
Kicking stuff off with
Increase the
Warrior
power
Bloody
coefficient
Roar
back for
is
Scorched
Berserker
Earth. I
trait.
love it.
Uh,
Oh, that's
The way
amazing.
that it stacked its damage bonus was, not working properly, but it will now be working properly.
Oh, that's
so we'll see a bit of a
amazing.
damage bump there.
Oh, woo!
And then Outrage is something
did
we want
it!
to kind of
Bloody
rework a
Roar
little
fix,
bit because
finally!
The loss of guaranteed synergy with the Headbutt combo that we saw after Headbutt no longer removes stability. It's not always
Right.
guaranteed that you have Outrage. So now Outrage is going to be a bit more easy to trigger. It's just going to look for nearby enemies as opposed to any particular thing on yourself. This is kind of similar to how Outrage used to work, where before it granted Berserk extension, where it would strike enemies, or rather count nearby enemies and give you adrenaline and whatnot. But now it's just going to look for a nearby enemy. If there's a nearby enemy, you get the longer duration. That's obviously much easier.
Protecting
It's always
foes,
pretty much
kinda
guaranteed
huge, I
in PvE,
think.
so we're reducing the
remember
bonus
which
time
trait that
there down
is.
to 3 seconds instead of 5. But it should be fairly similar overall, because now you're going to be able
This
to get
is
this bonus
great.
every single Outrage as opposed
Love
to
the
needing to
Scorched Earth
combo
bump.
with Headbutt.
That was
Yeah.
kind of huge when
A
they
couple of
nerfed
World
that.
vs. World
It's
changes as
kinda very-
well. Berserker was
impactful.
a pretty impactful, kind of strong DPS option for larger scale fights in World vs. World for a
really
while.
was.
And then Scorched Earth got nerfed, among
Yep.
some other things with Warrior in general.
Because that's not
And
actually a
Berserker kind of
projectile
fell
for
out a little bit
people who don't
of
know.
favor, so we're just bumping that back up a little bit. Not quite to what it was before, but just trying to see if that'll help it kind of stay relevant in those Zergs. And then Enchantment Collapse also going to have its ICD ticked up just slightly. Nothing huge.
This is my favorite update note.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
this is a good one.
I didn't know
Uh,
that they actually had
Yeah,
like
that's,
1.04
maybe a little bit
cooldowns.
of a huge jump there, but
That's
mostly this is just for
insane,
the interaction.
and I wish
with
I knew
Ninja's
all of
enchantment,
those.
which currently pulses every second, and so this just makes it.
I don't
that,
think I even knew that
interaction,
Enchantment Collapse had a
specifically just
cooldown.
a little bit less impactful. Where on with Spellbreaker already ripping.
Oh my god, now
a
I want all
significant
the
amount
like
of boons.
0.8
But
cooldowns.
yeah, then
I
we got
didn't- I
Breaching
didn't
Strike,
think
which is
no
going to be
things
baseline, so you'll now deal bonus
sounded
damage to
like
foes
that.
without boons.
Or didn't
And
round.
then if you want to talk about the Defiant stuff there, Cal.
Yeah, so this is something that we're going to see a bit throughout the update notes. In terms of what we show on this presentation, I think there's only a couple sections that we touch on, but once you see the full patch notes, you'll see a handful of things that care about, striking against crowd-controlled enemies or things along that line. We'll see that they are now going
Amazing.
to apply their
It's the
bonuses
best
against
patch ever.
defiant enemies. And this is, something that really applies in endgame PvE content where you're constantly fighting against defiant enemies. Skills that want to get their bonuses against a crowd-controlled
Watch them
enemy,
just be
not
like,
really
"And we removed
reliable.
Daring
We've
Dragon,"
seen
then I
this
can go cry
functionality
for the
kind of
rest of the
exist
stream.
for some sigils already, where they have like a different cooldown between defined enemies versus
Also,
players
some
or
sigils
whatnot.
apply their damage
And so
differently.
we're rolling a lot of that
Additive and
functionality into a
multiplicative,
lot of
which is
traits and
insane.
skills as well. So here on Warrior, you see like Fierce Blow, Unsuspecting Foe, Merciless Hammer. In some cases, we've made an adjustment. Like Unsuspecting Foe is not going to give you 50% damage bonus against defined enemies. It's only going to be 25%, but otherwise the trait is unchanged. So it's just, making these a bit more valuable in certain PvE content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because these are mechanics that make a lot of sense on the competitive side, like doing bonuses against CC'd enemies makes a lot of sense, but obviously not going to work out too well in high-end PvE.
Yes, indeed. And then we got the Revenant notes. So,
nothing for
again,
Bladesworn.
kind of bumping
Ow!
up some
right.
numbers here for Revenant Vindicator specifically in PvE. Another build that, even with the addition of that second dodge from the last patch, still hasn't been performing as much as we would like to see in PvE.
Yeah, so just a few damage bumps here, a couple of cost reductions. A big change here is actually the scavenger burst change on the PvE side. We're seeing it go from 5 endurance up to 20. So that's a pretty significant bump. It's going to make it a lot more potent as setting up that, dodge gameplay, the death drop style of gameplay that we see with a lot of power Vindies. And we want to really establish that as a solid DPS character.
Yeah. And I believe we do have some competitive changes as well.
Right, and so the top note here actually is game-wide,
yeah.
but this is the idea that Vindicator can't dodge while immobilized anymore. And honestly, this wasn't really ever necessarily super intended. Dodging while immobilized, obviously not something that anything can do other than, say, Mirage Cloak or Daredevil when you take a trait. But fundamentally, it's not really something that we want to be able to enable. We want immobilized to be kind of that natural counter to dodge. And Vindicator being able to dodge while immobilized was just a bit of a break there. That this feels like a good opportunity to really kind of fix that. It's not necessarily a bug, but it is not really where we want that dodge to be.
Yeah, and then on the rest of the notes, obviously, again, after the double dodge came back, or the second dodge, came back on the October 4th patch, Vindicators kind of started running a little bit wild. We had a few pretty quick fixes there, some changes in to try and lower their effectiveness, and we've definitely seen some success with it, but we still feel that Vindicators are overperforming a little bit on the PvP side, specifically just its ability, obviously here with Reaver's Rage, Scavenger Burst, Nomad's Advance. We also really want to try and
yes, Reaver's Rage, the stun break
get
that
it
does
off
everything.
a sort of more sustaining or support trait line, Salvation, if its purpose is to be doing damage. Because right now it does a lot of damage, but it can also take that sort of safer trait line, that really almost bunkery trait line. And so we're trying to hope that the DPS Vindicators in PvP are going to be opting into more DPS-oriented trait lines in order to be doing DPS.
Yeah, and this is specifically targeting some of the changes we made a little shortly after End of Dragon's launch, where we bumped up a lot of the red side of Alliance stance when Vindicator was still kind of trying to find its space. And so these are things that definitely push those numbers very high, and we feel this is kind of the right time to bring them back down a little bit.
Indeed. Moving past Vindicator, we've got yet again more PvE buffs here for Herald. This is mostly going to be focused on the facets from the Legendary Dragon stance. Again, just trying to bump up some of the viability for DPS Herald in PvE. And then something important to note here for Burst of Strength is that the second half of that is going to actually be game-wide. So this is just going to get the cooldown a little bit lower. Go ahead.
The first half is game-wide. Just
right.
Minor correction.
Sorry, first half is game-wide.
Burst of
Strength
is going to also increase outgoing condition damage.
Glad they clarified that.
So that's just a nice nod to kind of Condi Herald builds.
Exactly. And I believe, again, we have some changes for...
Yeah, so, rounding out the PvE side of the Revenant changes, we see some, just some more power buffs. We see Impossible Odds, Jade Winds, Shackling Wave, so Sword Offhand, a little bit of Assassin Stance in there.
Impossible Odds is really good.
A nice kind of QOL usability update to Rising Tide to make it a little bit more reliable. And this is, again,
I don't even know if you run
bringing up some
Shiro
power
these days,
Revenant builds.
You need, like,
that
Chalice for the
not feel the need, but that choose to slot these tools, right?
Yeah. And then here, the competitive notes.
Some minor tune-ups to Condi Rev. This is something that we touched on in the October update, and with the Torment changes and a few other changes, we were trying to bring Condi Rev back into the meta. Not really quite there yet, so we're just kind of doing a few other small changes. Seething Malice is kind of the big one here, giving a bit more of a Condi damage bump. to still, we feel like Conde Rev damage is
lot
still
in
up a little
PvP.
bit low. Torment change helped a lot, but not necessarily where it needs to be. So Seething Malice, slight damage bump, and then also just the Malice skills make them a little bit less expensive. So just giving more flexibility to how these builds are going to spend their energy.
We should have a low
Yeah.
base beat going
Yeah,
on
again,
the
Conde
stream.
Rev hasn't really seen a ton of success after the update we did in October 4th, so still trying to just tweak a few more numbers to potentially get it to see some more play. And now we've
Still looking at the
moved
chat
on
more
to
'cause
Ranger.
they're
We
home.
have the Ranger.
Yes, the Untamed class.
Right. So similarly to Warrior, Untamed
Tamed
has
was
a
already
lot
good.
of skills that care about striking crowd-controlled enemies. So basically, all of the Unleashed pet skills and kind of the two primary damage skills on the Unleashed Hammer, Wild Swing, and Savage Shockwave all very much struggle against defiant enemies, and they no longer will
Perilous
struggle.
Gift is
No
if
longer
that's
will struggle
game
against
wide.
defiant
Holy
enemies. And this is kind
cats.
of a goal to really establish Hammer as kind of that power
I wonder
DPS
if you can
weapon
use it to
that
cheat.
Untamed should have access to.
No, you
in
probably
PvE.
can't. You can't choose
And obviously, we've seen a
Couple
lot
CM
of
anymore.
Fervent Force in the meta. That's kind of the iconic, maybe a little bit overtuned, definitely a little bit overtuned trait that's kind of carrying Untamed DPS builds right now.
Very good.
And that's something we want to bring down at some point, but we want to make sure that the rest of the
I
spec
believe that's
is
the one
kind
that
of brought
reduces
up to
cooldowns
a
every time
level
you
that feels
CC
solid. So we're going to see a little bit
It's
later
got like
that
zero
we're buffing up
cooldown
Ferocious
itself.
Symbiosis as well, just making a little bit more non-fervent force options for power DPS Untamed builds to exist. And we really want to get them into the right spot before we then figure out what we're doing with fervent force, which is most likely nerfing it. Beyond that, we see some kind of more defensive updates to Untamed as well. We have Perilous Gift. This has always kind of been a janky heal skill. And the change here is mostly just making it similar behavior regardless of what health threshold you use it at. Because right now it will prevent you from dying. So if you're at 1 health, it basically prevents all incoming damage. But now it's just always going to prevent all incoming damage. And it's still going to heal you based off how much health you have missing. So if you use it earlier for that damage absorption component, you'll still get a little bit less healing. But it's going to be a bit more flexible, especially
holy crap, that's stupid.
large-scale fights
They have an
where you
invuln
have
now.
a lot of incoming damage.
Oh my gosh.
Feel that you want to press Perilous Gift a little bit earlier to get either the stab or the super speed or the the kind of window of time where you can go.
That's kind of huge if that's game wide. I assume it is.
And then also a few changes here are buffing up the kind of defense CC side of the hammer, which was pretty much only the CC side of the hammer. We're going to see a bit more defense here, getting some barrier from Wild Swing, getting some barrier on Overbearing Smash. If you go to the next slide, we're also going to have Savage Shockwave going to give protection, and also bumping up the stability a little bit on the Hammer Unleash skill. And I guess one more change here is that Restorative Strike's kind of supposed to be that defensive Grandmaster trait, is also going to grant you protection whenever you unleash, on a cooldown, of course, since that cooldown is much lower, but a little bit of prot to really establish that as the defensive, more bruisery, Untamed Grandmaster trait choice. A few more changes to round out on the PvE side. Debilitating Blows is now going to apply some different conditions in PvE, and this is to, again, kind of be more of that DPS damage option. Obviously, poison damaging condition instead of vuln, which is very easily capped.
Sad. I want a Blades
and
updates.
Slow instead of weakness.
Oh well.
Now, obviously, the Ferocious Symbiosis, minor damage boost. That's 3 to 4, which is basically 15 to 20 once you're at full stacks. A nice little damage buff there. And again, last up, I don't need to read off every change. Roy's already on the next slide, so we're fine there.
I'm trying to keep the pace. Cal really just wants to talk, for hours.
I just get into the groove of speaking words about Guild Wars 2, and it never stops.
Get you, Cal.
We can just run it again, to be honest, after we finish. So.
Yeah, no problem. So Chomp from the Drake family is getting a damage reduction, and this is a nod to Untamed in PvP for the most part. You don't need to nerf Chomp in PvE. Untamed, obviously, very, very good. A lot of this is just from the upfront burst potential on kind of the port in plus Drake plus everything else. Maul, maybe. Pretty strong skill.
Yeah.
So this is, bringing down Chomp. We brought down Tail Swipe a few months ago, and this is just bringing down their Drake damage a little bit more. And this is obviously something we'll be keeping a pretty close eye on. But this Chomp definitely stands out as kind of the most overperforming element of this combo.
Yeah. And then next, just for World versus World, again, one of the last sort of things we were trying to do with the last update was bring support druid in to potentially be a meta pick or at least more of a viable option in World versus World. And definitely seen some success with it.
They did
just
Rev.
trying to bump up the numbers, the healing, excuse me, that you're getting from staff a little bit. So
Rev, they did Warrior.
Healing coefficients up there. Druid.
Rev's getting some PvE.
And this is something we'll see a little bit
Herald
more
buffs.
once we get
Looks
to
like
Elementalist. This is
a couple of
bringing down
PvP
Firebrand
buffs and
is going to be
World
a
versus
pretty
World
significant
Vindicator nerf.
shakeup to the support meta in World v World, but we do feel that there's room for
PvP
Druid to come up a little bit, probably for Tempest to come up a little bit, as we really try to create
it should. It was
a diverse set of support choices
broken
in World v World.
It was both bugged and
Absolutely.
then very
I
broken.
could be wrong, but I believe that is it for Ranger. Yes.
I didn't do anything to Renegade, so
Yeah,
you're fine.
Deadeye.
Some exciting Deadeye changes.
Yeah, so Deadeye.
I guess they gave you more
kind
Condi
of
damage in
where,
PvP.
we've seen the potential that Deadeye has in
Neil initiative
obviously
cost,
on,
interesting.
Golem benchmarks. You can see how powerful Deadeye can be. But
Okay, so this is what I want them to do
real
for
gameplay
Bladesworn. Maybe
situations-
they'll end up doing this for Neil. Like now move while kneeling at 75%.
in real gameplay situations is a little bit too clunky, a little bit less reliable, and so
Wow.
you don't really see a whole lot of Deadeye in high end.
The range is going down on Deadeye from
some adjustments
1500 to
here to
12. Watch Reddit
really bring
explode
Deadeye-
about
kinda
this.
clean up some of those usability.
Oh
problems,
my
potentially.
gosh. The
And the big
balls
thing
on
here
these
is that
people.
While you're kneeling, you'll be able to move at a reduced speed. And this is a pretty significant movement speed hit. This is something we'll be keeping a pretty close eye on to see how this actually plays out in practice. But it's just going to give you a lot more flexibility in how you position while still having access to the more powerful half of the rifle.
Yeah, and I think we can jump into game real quick just to show
Yeah,
off
we're
this.
going to show this off a little bit. And there's a minor update to the kneeling skill on slot 4 as well that we can show off. So now kneeling, you can see that
Do
you
they have
can
animations?
move around a little
Nope,
bit.
he just
Pretty slow.
walk.
This is something that we can also tune on a game mode basis. if
Can
we
you just press
feel
RP walk to
we need
toggle it
get even
off?
slower in competitive modes, honestly.
They can tune
But yeah,
it on the
and you
game
see
mode
now
basis,
that kind of this switch up to the 4 skill, we've added, I think it's called Death's Advance, because we have Death's Retreat on the non-kneeling half. But when you're standing in your smoke field, you're now going to have access to a little port forward.
Neat.
And again, that's just trying to give a bit more flexibility to how you position and
Dude,
how
I
you
wish
move
this
while
like
you're
care
kneeling,
and stuff
because
and
that's really what matters.
they're
in
going over with Deadeye right now, went into
fights where you
Bladesworn.
feel like you have to move, which
Oh,
is
man.
a lot of.
That class
Very good
is
stuff.
So
clunky.
beyond that, there's some range reductions here. This is
Yeah,
we felt it's a
fun.
pretty good opportunity to do this as we're giving more flexibility to moving, bringing down kind of this super long range component of the Deadeye rifle.
Goodbye, Deadeye.
Potentially a good opportunity. And one final note here on Death Judgment is that this is going to pierce toward its target, pierce through a bunch of other enemies.
Interesting.
And the goal here is that you're always going to be able to kind of confirm your Death's Judgment against your marked foe. And something to note here is that the damage
unblockable?
is pretty significantly reduced, especially even more so in competitive, because this is more just trying to guarantee the Death's Judgment more so than it is to make Death's Judgment an AoE skill. So we're going to see significantly lower damage to non.
Not unblockable, and thieves don't have a signet
Alright.
that makes their crap unblockable, so that's interesting.
Then
I think
just
they
some
must have a way.
general
a handful
PvE
of
buffs. Once again,
power coefficient buffs.
just trying to bring get some more DPS thief in the meta a little bit.
And
for
an
PvE.
exciting note here at the top as well. This is for
Yes.
Specter. We've added a damage reduction to the Shroud. Currently in PvE only. This is something that we're going to be
It's
keeping
like,
a pretty
please
close eye
don't.
on. Whether or not we extend it to competitive modes and how much we extend it to competitive modes.
Uh,
We really wanted to get a little bit more data. Like, this is something that we might make a decision on before the November update ships, but we may or may not. That's not, hopefully that doesn't get locked in forever. We're still getting some data on
If
how
those
Specter's playing in
passionates are up
PvP
yet.
after the October balance update, because we still, see Condi Specter lurking around a little bit. Maybe not super top tier, but it's still a competitive option. So whether or not it needs damage reduction on Shroud, or if this is the right time to get back the initiative that's lost from equipping Specter, we're still kind of figuring that out. But we definitely want to have this damage reduction in PvE to compensate for the loss of Shroud health. And this obviously doesn't completely compensate for like the adjustment to consume shadows and how that was impacted by the reduction in Shroud. But that's something that we'll want to take kind of a more holistic look at Specter and how Specter support builds work and all the tools that are accessible to Specter support builds instead of having them so focused around consume shadows. So for the short term, adding this damage reduction, this might help like DPS Specter builds a little bit more, and then longer term, we're going to be looking at support Specter really looks like.
Indeed. And
So
engineer
next up, we
now.
have some engineer. You want to talk about engineer?
I'd love to talk about engineer. Pretty similar vein as some of the previous specs.
very
Again,
PvE patch.
Holosmith hasn't seen quite as much success as for DPS in PvE content as of late. Definitely had a lot of success at one point. So we're just trying to increase the viability a little bit. So just again, pretty similar
Lasting
stuff, bumping up
module.
some numbers there
Pretty
for
significant.
PvE. And then we've got a pretty big rework actually to one of the Grandmaster traits. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention for this page, Cal, but
Yeah, so I mean, players, you guys can all read it from the chat that we are buffing both power and condition Holosmith builds, but we see like both of those are builds that could use a little bit of a tune-up. And the next thing we're going to talk about is enhanced capacity storage unit.
yes,
And
or
obviously this is a
ECSU
trait.
for short.
ECSU. Obviously, this is a trait that gives bonuses or expands your heat capacity up to 150%. And a handful of skills currently have bonuses above 100% threshold, but a lot of skills don't, particularly all the utility skills. So we've gone through and kind of added those threshold bonuses. A lot of them are
Okay, so there's some PvP changes.
logical, I guess. You see, like Cauterize removes conditions when you're above 50%. It's going to remove even more conditions when you're above 100%. There's a lot of stuff in that vein, but this is basically just adding a bit more broader value to this trait and really establishing it as kind of the power DPS trait, because you're going to see a lot of extra bonus damage on these utility skills that you can get if you're above 100% heat.
Significant for like roaming and world versus world and PvP and stuff.
Then we've also got some non Holosmith changes. So just a couple of bumps here for Scrapper, not only DPS, and this is obviously going to be PvP only. So Scrapper definitely used to be really good build in PvP. Still has some options, but hasn't been quite as strong, quite as competitive as of late. So just getting some damage on Electro Whirl, it's Hammer 2. And then obviously we got Medic Gyro and Bypass Coating as well, getting a couple of buffs there, just some cooldown reduction.
Yeah, and really the thing, we're really being, this might be obvious from the list of changes here, but we're being pretty careful with Scrapper, because we have seen, like, historically, when Scrapper sustain is too high or when Hammer is too much of a damage threat, we really see, like, how much of a balance problem Scrapper can be. So we're being a little bit careful here.
You gave it barrier on damage, man.
More offensive side of Scrapper, like Electro Whirl. Bypass Coating is the Blast Gyro
trait is
so
nutty,
incentivizing
even at 5%.
Blast Gyro a bit more than
15
some of the more
world versus
defensive
world.
options.
That's why it's like the best roaming
the slight shave on Medic Gyro, as Scrapper could use a little bit more sustain, but we are being fairly careful. But another like relevant note there that NG players will probably be happy to hear is Healing Turret. Is a skill that has been kind of in a weird spot recently, because the turret will sometimes be very delayed in overcharging, but we've actually fixed that bug, and that will be going out for this update. So it's going to always, the turret will always overcharge before your detonate becomes available.
Yes, Healing Turret enjoyers rejoice. Yes, enjoyers rejoice. Excuse me. Tongue-tying myself.
Just a few more changes on the engineer side of things.
Yeah, I think you're particularly excited about this top change, aren't you?
Box of Nails.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, I am kind of excited about Box of Nails, because if you look, when we look at Toolkit, we see a lot of skills that are pretty good, and Pry Bar does some good damage. Block obviously very good. Magnet obviously very good. The Tool Belt skill is a solid damage component. But then Box of Nails just sits there and stares at you and says, "Well, I don't really do anything. Why are you ever playing Toolkit? Because I have Box of Nails on me." But so we took a kind of a mini rework here to Box of Nails to make it a bit more potent, a bit more synergistic, even with the rest of Engineer as well.
I think it's cute.
And this is going to add
Cal's
a little
got
bit more
Box of Nails
CC.
story. That's why I named my podcast.
I think it's only a 1.5 second immobilize, but a little immobilize tacked on to the first hit if it strikes an enemy that is either crowd controlled or movement impaired. So this is obviously going to combo with Magnet Pull into Box of Nails, or combo with any CC into Box of Nails, or now that we've increased the ammo from 1 to 2, you could Box of Nails, and you could Box of Nails again, and the second one is going to get that immob there.
It's very cool.
Yeah. So who doesn't want more nails? Or
more nails. This really hopefully brings Toolkit into a really compelling spot for, I mean, especially on the competitive side, as kind of that more bruisery, some defense, some CC, some damage option as a utility skill.
Yep.
Okay, you have to You have
The
to
middle note here talking
be
about rifle
close to your
burst.
mech. I
This
like
is
that.
mostly
It's very
an
cute.
animation cleanup thing on the PvE side. We see that it's going to fire one less projectile, and then the damage is going to be about the same. The animation currently looks a little bit janky. Players may have noticed this, especially when you have quickness. It just shoots very, very, very fast. So this is cleaning it up a little bit without impacting the damage too much there. And on the competitive side, this is going to be a damage reduction because we see
Good.
rifle auto is just a bit too powerful. And we
Yeah,
see
it
this
is.
mostly on the mechanist side, where we see mechanist builds with rifle auto just being not necessarily super impactful, but powerful enough without putting in that much effort that it is something that we decided to bring down this update.
Yeah, and while talking about Mechanist, obviously last change going to be Mechanist specific. We had a couple of slight nerfs there for Mechanist in the October 4th patch. This isn't so much of a a numbers change in terms of damage reduction. This is kind of trying to just add like a little bit more of a layer to the play style, to the rotation potentially on Mechanist. So right now, again, obviously, you can read, but it'll just reduce the stats of the actual mech by 50% if you move away by 360 units or more.
Yeah, and there's some leeway here. I think it takes about 6 seconds before the mech starts losing potential. And really the idea here is kind of a more interesting way to add a bit more of a more positioning awareness kind of. You want to be positioned near your mech to get the full power. And this is a way to introduce, just a little bit
so
more
it's not
depth
just like
into
Ranger where you
how
can
you play
send a
Mechanist
head off into
in PvE
Narnia.
right now.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're going to be keeping a close eye on. And, we might get a few other Mechanist changes in for launch because we do see it as, the goal here is that Mechanist is still overperforming a bit. And this is an interesting way to bring it down or to kind of adjust its play style. But we do want to see how this plays out and how this impacts the spec. And then we'll probably follow up with some additional adjustments as well.
Absolutely. And I believe that is it for Engineer.
We can hop into Chronomancer.
What we got left?
Indeed.
Chrono, Necro.
Similar vein. We're buffing, power Chrono. Chrono Phantasma, a big piece of that for PvE. Chat can read, Roy. They can see parentheses PvE on a lot of these changes.
I won't speak. My apologies.
Yeah. But Chrono Phantasma is kind of one of these things that got nerfed a long time ago, and this is just a good opportunity. As Power Chrono is underperforming, we just bring Chrono Phantasma back up to where it used to be, and that's a nice little damage boost to that. See a couple other buffs here to some of the wells to make them maybe a bit more compelling DPS
Probably
options.
Not.
And the final note here is just a slight shade to continuum shift continuum split, in PvP. And this is mostly, we've seen the strength of Chrono since it got Distortion back, and we really like to see Chrono back with Distortion, and it's in a pretty decent spot, just a little bit overperforming, and Continuum Split is something that got its duration increased during that window of time where Distortion was unavailable, and now with Distortion back, we feel like it makes a lot of sense to bring this back down to 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, and so you'll still get most of the value that you currently have, right? Kind of at the lower threshold for Continuum Split. It's really going to be more kind of aimed towards that really the end threshold where currently it's 6 seconds. Now it'll be 4 if you stack up all your clones. And so just to make it a little bit easier to play into the Chrono that we've seen definitely being played a lot more since that Distort change, or since they got it back.
Right, and rounding out the Mesmer changes are a handful of
leaking. My bad.
Buffs to sword auto attack, and actually a big notable change here at the bottom. This is targeting Staff Axe Mirage, which we've seen is definitely something that's overperforming. And kind of the issue that we've identified with Staff Axe Mirage is it is this solid alacrity source that also does a ton of damage. And as we're talking about kind of opportunity cost and holes in rolls, it's like or rather power budget as well. Some of these philosophy words that we threw around a couple weeks ago. This is a case where this build specifically is able to do a bit too much of everything. And so the change here is shifting a lot of the boons and a lot of the, boons, might and alacrity, onto the clones version of the skill as well. So when you have Infinite Horizon and your clones use Chaos Vortex, that's now going to grant as
Uh-oh.
Got some stream lag here.
Decide rather if you want more staff clones for more boon uptime, or if you want more axe clones for more damage. And this is again creating that kind of a decision point, that opportunity cost to prevent this build from getting everything that it wants.
Absolutely. Now we can move on to the next line. Again, apologies for skipping ahead a little bit, but we've got some Necro
Reaper buffs.
changes. Yeah, Reaper buffs. Indeed. Again, obviously going to be for PvE, other than that top line there. Reaper just not a spec that we're seeing played as often in PvE, and so just trying to get some more, mostly power damage up there on Reaper. The top line, again, like I said, is going to be game-wide. It's going to be baseline. This is just the third hit on your auto attack for Greatsword. Reduces the recharge of Gravedigger every time you activate it or hit it.
Yeah, I just didn't like that for a really long time. Mirage gave better
your
alacrity
mic may be
than the
muted.
thing with time in its name.
I forgot to unmute.
They grew.
Unfortunate. There you
You'll
go.
love to,
It looks
you'll
like
love to
they're
see
doing.
it.
I don't know. They're not
This
really
is why no
nerfing
one
that,
gives us
but-
a mute button
So
when we're in
I'll
studio.
I'll mute at some point too. I'll mute right now, so it looks like it's intentional. Hold on one second.
Okay. Anyway, so
Thanks,
we
guys.
see power reaper buffs. There's one other change a couple slides down.
Well, what you could do with the what
soul
they're talking
buffs,
about
I
the
believe,
staff
as well.
X Mirage thing is you could just
I'll
go
get to,
into.
Just trying to give it a bit more.
Since they
Obviously, there's
changed how
some
it works,
shroud
where
buffs here
you
as
would
well, but
summon
also
a
just
clone
giving
that
a
was
bit more
using
damage
your weapon
outside
set,
of shroud, chilling Nova's.
and
I've
that
seen
would be 100%
either state,
accurate.
but just a
You
bit
would just
more
summon a bunch of X
consistency in
clones
damage
and then just sit
instead
in
of
staff
putting
and
it
ambush
all
over and
on
over and
shroud
over.
for power.
So you would give alacrity and to be able to
So
do
then
all
we
the
can move
axe
on to
ambushes. You would
Scourge.
just
Roy,
do a
you'll
ton
probably
of
want to talk
damage
about this one
and
since you love
provide permanent
you love
alacrity
this
and light.
change.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty easy. Just feed from corruption, really strong trait. Just trying to reduce some of the effectiveness of it. Get so many boons for free, and so just bringing the durations down a little bit. And this is definitely a trait that we think is probably something we want to take a deeper look at some point. But just in the meantime, just trying to again reduce a little bit of its effectiveness. How much value it gets kind of for free.
Rip
Right
Scourge
now,
forever,
Scourge. And
dude.
Scourge definitely very powerful, very mainstay part of large scale fights right now in World versus World. And a big part of that is going to be feed from corruption's value.
I would definitely agree that feed from corruption is definitely a trait that is something we probably want to rework in the future. It's historically been a pretty big problem in the kind of the breadth in boon application that it can do,
This trait.
especially to a class that's a bit less focused on boons. But in the short term, this is definitely kind of the way to address this. Is what we also did
boon, you
PvP
gain
a while
it.
back. It's just reducing the durations.
Since they're nerfed the
Indeed.
10-man
And
Scourge
then we
trait.
got some just general necro changes here, general necro updates. Obviously on top, again, there's that soul barbs change that Cal mentioned. And then on the competitive side, kind of buffing up some
2 to 5,
utilities
excuse
that we haven't really
me?
seen being played very often.
Okay, fine.
Just for PvP
One
is going to
MU.
be Corrupt Boon, which used to be a really valuable, really strong skill before it got changed to having an ammo and lowering the immediate amount of boon rip it has. So we're kind of just reverting that. I'm going to increase the cooldown just to just to be safe.
So,
but again, it will be
the
ripping 5
Locust
boons
is
at
actually
once
kind
now,
of like low
really
key
giving
OP
you that more
for World
powerful
versus World fights.
version of that skill that it used to have. And then
that
the
they're
rest of the
buffing it is
changes
kind
is
of
going to be
nuts.
again just some utility skills, spectral armor,
Especially
Signet of
with the
Spite,
fact
Signet of
that
Locust
they
that don't
have
really
a
see very
Signet,
much play.
very good
Just
Signet
trying
cooldown
to
trait.
buff those up a little bit for the competitive modes.
That's a
And
build
give
right
give
there.
Necro more options with its utilities.
Definitely true.
Because that's also true damage
Definitely
because
true.
it's life.
Definitely true.
All right, and I believe this means.
There's no other professions, right? I think we're done.
All right, have a great day, everyone.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about Ellie.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little fun stuff. But Specter getting a rework here.
Oh yeah, we did leak the Shatterstone buff. We didn't leak the specifics, but last week on Extra Life we did talk about Shatterstone buff. This is a thing that's happening. We'll also show this off a little bit in game. We've taken a pretty serious look on at the Ellie
that was a
Scepter.
joke.
And this is
They
something
got
that sees a
Ellie.
bit of play in PvE, but it's more just because, honestly, because the numbers are so good, or rather good enough. And a lot of the skills are a bit dated, a lot of the skills are a bit clunky, especially on the competitive side. There's just a lot of unreliable skills. And so that was kind of one of the big focuses of this update. And so we see Dragon's Tooth. This one's actually a pretty scary change, Roy.
Yeah, and I think we'll just hop into game while you talk about.
You want to go over to the moving golem? There's a moving golem in the lobby somewhere.
Roy's like, where is it?
Roy doesn't know anything about the PvP lobby.
This is the first time I've ever been in here. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it's behind you.
Behind me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There we go.
So obviously, Dragon's Tooth, not a super reliable skill because when your opponent holds W, they probably never get hit by it. Now Dragon's Tooth is gonna, track a bit better, and this does make it
track a bit
pretty scary.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty scared about this change, but it makes it a lot more flexible or a lot more reliable, and we'll probably bring down the damage at some point. But we want to see kind of how these scepter buffs play out and how these, especially the Dragon's Tooth change, how this really affects competitive scepter usage. And we see, maybe Fresh Air Weaver might make a reappearance, or some sort of separate DPS build in PvP. We'll see. There's a handful of other changes here, obviously beyond the fire changes. You might have seen Roy's fire auto attack is just a lot smoother, a lot more fluid. That's always been kind of a clunky to use auto attack, even if the damage numbers have been there. It's just not something you really feel good pressing. So obviously the Shatterstone buff here is that it's going to strike on deploy in addition to on explosion, and the explosion is also going to be a bit faster. It's also going to chill instead of vuln. So this again makes the skill a lot more reliable.
Scepter buffs, I
if you
dig
center this on your enemy, you're going to get that chill. It's going to be a lot harder to escape, and you might actually confirm an entire Shatterstone instead of ever confirming Shatterstone. And then Water Trident here is being kind of refocused into a damaging skill. Scepter really is a damaging weapon, and it had Water Trident as kind of this little bit of healy in there, but it's not something that really fit with the rest of the weapon. It's still going to heal yourself when you strike an enemy with a Water Trident, but it is going to just be a lot more damage focused. Bonus damage against chilled enemies, multiple ammo, and it's also going to have it's going to throw 3 tridents at nearby enemies, so a little bit more AoE, even though that one was already an AoE.
We haven't gotten to staff
We're going
yet.
to see some similar behavior on some of the air skills.
They're going to announce staff, and people are going to flip. I know
it. So air auto is not really changing at all, but air 2 and 3 are both going to have a minor AoE component, just trying to make this, again, a little bit more reliable in a team fight, a little bit more of that AoE pressure that you want to see from a team fight or large-scale combat.
Dragon.
The vulnerability from Shatterstone is now on Air 2, and then Blinding Flash is also going to weaken enemies that are vulnerable. That's something we've kind of added to all of the Scepter skills, where the third skill gets a slight bump up or a slight bonus if it strikes an enemy who has basically been affected by the 2 skill or, from any other source. But Air 3 cares about vulnerable targets. Fire 3, we saw that Phoenix does a little bit bonus burning against burning targets, and so on and so forth. And we also added a second ammo to Blinding Flash, just to make that a little bit more reliable as a defensive option.
Yes. And just to be clear, that was Blinding Flash, not Lightning Flash, just in case.
Blinding Flash.
Yeah.
I don't know what I said.
I think you said Blinding Flash, a little muffled, but I just want just to be clear.
Wrapping up things in Earth, we have a minor update to Rock Barrier. It's just a kind of an undertuned defensive skill. It's now going to give you barrier and resistance in addition to that throwable toughness.
Right.
So even if you do just pop it immediately, you will get some resistance to kind of maybe set up your burst potential, and a little bit of barrier just as that more solid defensive option. And finally, Dust Devil's getting a slight adjustment, changing it into a 3-pulse.
It's a lot of blind
field.
on Ellie now.
This is still going to blind on the first pulse. It's not going to blind on all 3 pulses. First pulse will blind, and then it's just going to deal damage. And
it's going to be like,
enemies
that's a lot of blinding, man.
You get that combo with Hurl, or combo with auto attack, or bleeding from any source. It is a little bit more of that space control. And the final note that'll be on the slide once we get back to there is that Rock Barrier is also going to, or Hurl rather, is just going to fire a lot more quickly.
And there we go. There are those notes. Look at that.
Another just nice usability update.
Yeah, exactly. But just maybe some fun new tools for Elementalist Scepter there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see Scepter as a kind of the more
this is awesome
damage focused option.
Not a warrior patch.
Well, see some play, especially in
not really a warrior patch, but
it has some damaging skills and some supporty skills.
I wonder how people react, because this is like
it's kind of all in on.
I feel like what people are going to take most away from
really
this is the Firebrand nerf, but there's a lot of
how
buffs
it provides
in this.
offense as something like Scepter could be. So really trying to establish Scepter as that super focused DPS weapon is one of the goals of this update, and I think we have some really exciting tools now on this kit.
Absolutely, but that's not actually it for Ellie. So we've got a couple of catalyst changes as well. Kind of aimed at PvE a little bit, but then some.
Is this only catalyst? That's
well.
they are a trait. That's
right. So the first
big.
Note here is a bit of a nerf. This is obviously going to have some competitive impact as well. But the aura traits, so empowering aura, hardened aura, all the traits that Catalyst cares about.
Well, now I have to make the build
or
the video before this goes through.
Now going to, require the Catalyst to apply an aura to themselves, and this is cleaning up some potential shenanigans with like a bunch of catalysts all playing powerful aura, which was kind of cool, and honestly one of the initial ideas when designing the spec. The reason why it was when you obtain any aura is to kind of create these synergies, create that synergy with Tempest that we see as fairly potent in competitive modes. But it turns out it's probably just a bit too powerful, and we're restricting that to self only. But beyond that, we're going to have some kind of exciting buffs or improvements to the rest of Catalyst. Obviously, we'll come back to the Hammer Slot 3 skills. But Spectacular Sphere, not going to be reducing your outgoing damage anymore. And Earth Sphere is now going to grant Aegis instead of Resistance. So this is kind of an opportunity we saw to spread out Aegis a little bit. And this is something we'll be keeping a pretty close eye on because Earth Sphere is kind of on that lower end of cooldowns. But this is a pretty potent tool that a lot of more supporty like quickness. Obviously, you're taking Spectacular Sphere on the
like
quickness
that.
catalyst. So now you're going to have access to Aegis in addition to everything else.
Okay.
Empowering Aura is also getting a slight bump. This is just bring Power Catalyst up a bit. These are both changes that are kind of compensating for previous nerfs to Catalyst, where it got hit pretty heavily, pretty hard in the last round of updates, and this is just bringing it back up a little bit. Giving some damage bonus to, again, make sure that the difference between the damage builds and the support builds are there, especially on the damage side.
Yeah, and then did you want to show the Hammer 3 stuff?
I mean, we don't have to. Okay. We can show it off, but the gist of it is that the projectiles are now mostly just going to be a visual effect, and they're still going to be used to determine where to throw the grand finale projectile from. But the damage component of Hammer Slot 3 skills is just going to be a pulsing spell area, kind of that once per second. And this is really trying to fix the issue where these skills were just way overperforming against certain sizes of hitboxes versus underperforming on other hitboxes. It just making them a lot more consistent. And we're going to be bumping up the damage a little bit in this update as, again, part of the Catalyst damage buffs and without the concern of blowing out against large hitboxes.
Absolutely. And then finally here, or next up, we got some Weaver buffs there. In PvP, this is going to be mostly Condi Weaver, obviously.
Condi Weaver coming back.
So Shearing Edge, just game-wide, is going to inflict bleeding. But then in PvP...
4 stacks of bleeding for some amount of time.
Some amount of time. It's definitely a amount of time, for sure. Non-zero.
Shearing Edge, definitely one of the weaker dual attacks. And this really kind of makes it more of a relevant skill for Condi Weaver, especially.
Yeah, cool. And then just increasing some burning applications there and duration stacks for some of the other sword skills there, just in Weaver. Just in PvP on Weaver.
Yeah, Condi Weaver doesn't really feel too far off in PvP right now, so we're just doing a couple of smaller buffs to really gauge how those play out before we go too hard.
Good.
Yep, absolutely.
Dumpstered Tempest Rings.
And
they still have their
wrapping up,
effect,
we have a couple of Earthshield nerfs.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, Earthshield is actually very good.
There's a buff to Elemental Bastion. This is something we touched on earlier. With the Druid changes, this is just a case where Tempest is a little bit under where we think it could be in World v World. And obviously the Earthshield adjustments here for PvP are... Earthshield's really been kind of the dominant force for both Catalyst and Tempest at the moment.
And
before we go too heavily on Catalyst nerfs, we do want to bring down Earthshield because it really stands out as such a potent defensive option. So we see here the barrier pulse is coming down a bit. That's going to affect both skill 2 and skill 4, and also just the invuln going to be a lot less available.
Yeah. And I believe, did we mention the evasive
That is reduced by a trait. So
good call. There's also a long-standing bug with evasive arcana. Fire dodge not triggering properly. That has also been fixed. So a notable bug fix.
Honestly, I'm a bigger fan of all these bug fixes than everything else.
For Elementalists, but no longer.
Also, very good change for Condi Weaver.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could be wrong, but I think this is our last slide, Cal.
That is the last slide. So I guess we can kind of talk about... do you have anything to talk about, Roy?
Big staring dragon.
Well, obviously, we can wrap up. But, I think we mentioned this a little bit at the start. First of all, obviously...
This is very cool.
The
very
document will be posted to the forums directly as the stream ends here momentarily. So definitely, you can go read it and go look it over.
Logged in, get ready to post!
Of course, we really are looking for feedback on this. Of course, the Firebrand change is going to be pretty crazy. And it's, but it's definitely something we feel is necessary for the class. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, the spec is just it's very, very difficult to balance it. Where we end up in the situation where it's just not viable in PvP, and yet it's a little bit too strong in PvE certainly. And so we're hoping that this is going to be allow more room for Firebrand to be in a better balanced state. Again, we're kind of expecting on release on November 29th, it might be underperforming, it might be overperforming with this change. Giving it instant access to tomes, giving it no tome cooldowns, obviously going to be a very, very powerful effect. But definitely something, we're gonna make sure we keep an eye on. A lot more numbers for
Love
us to
it.
be able to change now and tweak to put it in a place that we want it to be in. So definitely something I think that's pretty important to keep in mind for this. But
For sure.
again, we'll
And
obviously be
did.
looking
Warrior was
at
second.
everyone's feedback for it as well.
Some berserker buffs and some
Obviously, go to the
spellbreaker buffs
forums,
actually.
post your feedback. We definitely do have some space to make some additional changes between now and the
They went by weight
release
class. I
date,
think they did
as we've
heavy,
kind of
medium,
talked
light.
about many times before. But it's just always worth saying that the whole goal of previewing these changes is that if there's anything
Amazing.
that's
I love
horribly
that they
wrong,
do
or if
this.
there's anything that feels like it's maybe missing, could use a slight bump that's not there, or some of these changes, the number's a little bit off, there's definitely room, there's time for us to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of focus on DPS builds, especially on the PvE side for this update. And part of that is because the Firebrand change is going to be so significant. And we kind of want to see how that shakes out, get that into a good spot, and see how that affects kind of all of the kind of boon support meta. And if we need to make follow-up adjustments to Mechanist, that's kind of the other thing that stands out, Alacrity Mechanist as kind of these one
Some good
dominant
spellbreaker buffs.
meta builds right
Couple,
now.
but they're making a lot
And
of
so
like
we
traits
want
apply
to
to PvE,
kind of bring these
like
back
defiant stuff.
into a more balanced state before we go too hard on bringing up other support specs, because they may already be in a pretty good spot for a lot of these, and they're just being pushed out by Firebrand. They're being pushed out by Mechanist. So a lot more focus on the DPS side for this update, but that's not all we're thinking about.
Hopefully
We
we
don't
can still
only
clear
think about
Harvest
DPS
Temple.
builds.
It's gonna be
That's something we can't
interesting.
balance. It's just this is what we felt like made the most sense for this update with the other changes that are happening.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
But apart from that, I think, again, just, repeating to make sure you're giving us your feedback. We'll be watching. We'll be looking at it. Still, obviously, a couple more weeks, in case there's anything major, as Cal said, in the meantime. But other than that, I think we can just wrap it up. And,
I don't
thank
know
you
if
very
I
much.
I think I said it earlier, but, with the Firebrand changes, it is such a significant shift. There's potentially going to be some things that are maybe a little bit unbalanced in one way or the other. This is something that we're going to be looking at
That's right.
potentially adjusting between November and the next balance update. It's not going to be the case that we ship Firebrand and it's not going to be changed for months. It is the case that, if we see problems with Firebrand in either direction, we have a lot of opportunity to make further adjustments there. And that's not going to say we're going to make everything immediately. We're not going to necessarily make hotfix
Yeah,
changes.
don't rush
unless
it, man.
something are
I'd rather than
completely out
like
of
fix
whack.
Blades for
But,
and
in
Firebrand, whatever
future
it is, take their
updates,
time.
we
than
may see a bit of
shove in,
Firebrand tuning between balance updates as well.
bad
Yep.
updates.
Absolutely.
Rifle change,
And,
honestly.
I believe this is
thing
the
I'm
part where we
most
kind of
excited
stumble
for.
around
Not the
for a little
nerf,
bit
but like
before
the
we actually
moving.
end the stream.
Excellent.
Fortunately,
perfect.
I have full control of it now, so
Yeah,
I can just
Roy
end the
can just
stream.
shut off the stream.
I can just turn it off. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for joining us at home for this balance update. And, thanks for watching.
Amazing.
Thanks for checking it out.
Thanks for putting up with slightly reduced quality.
I
Slightly
mean,
reduced
I don't know.
eyebrows.
I think it was fine.
We should've
No,
gotten a
obviously,
big banner.
Roy ran the stream and did a great job.
I clicked a couple buttons. It was,
Clicked some buttons, made all these cool
Yeah.
slides and scenes. So big shout outs to Roy. And
I don't know about all that. But anyways, yes, thank you very much for watching the stream. We are going to actually wrap it up this time. And
don't forget, we're posting the notes on the forums. Go take a look. Go post some feedback. We'll be
Indeed.
I'll be
As-
reading later today for sure.
as always,
All rock.
your skills and bounce lead, Cal CMC Cohen. I've been Roy Marks. And
Roy
thank you very much
Marks.
for watching. Until next time, we'll see you in the mists. Have a great day.
All right, Firebrand nerfs, Deadeye changes, Spellbreaker slight buff, some adjustments across PV. What do you guys think? I'm excited. I'm really excited for the direction this game's going. Super duper a fan. Let me know, discuss in the comments below. If you feel like it, catch a stream Monday, Tuesday. We're going to be definitely going to Sunday, Monday now from now on till forever because we're doing Harvest Temple progression. So that'll be at 8 Eastern or depending on a little bit earlier or later than when we start. So that'll be back regular on the channel. Obviously, lots of data mines, previews for items and stuff on Tier Tribune and tiertribune.com. It's shifting over to the VOA website just so I can consolidate some resources I have. And yeah, let me know what you thought. Let me know what you're excited for, what you're not excited for. Throw your feedback on the forums. Try to be civil, constructive feedback's better than that. What would you guys think? Let me know what y'all thought in the comments and hit me up on here on YouTube and on Twitch. I think that's it. All right. Cheers. It's exciting. I will see you later, Tyria.